Hello everyone. Welcome to Feedback episode 22. Today we're joined by Jennie Gottschalk and composer Michelle Liu. Hello to both of you. And today we will be talking with them about Michelle's piece from 2017 for Yarnwire. The piece is called Different Fur, and this piece is featured on Yarnwire's album called Yarnwire Currents 5. So for those of you who are listening and watching on YouTube Live and Facebook Live, you can always submit questions ahead of time to feedback@yarnwire.org or join the live chat on YouTube or Facebook to submit your questions in real time. We love to hear from you, so please do so. Thank you for being here with us today and talking to us about your piece, Michelle. And thanks to Jennie as well. With that, I'm handing over to Jennie.
Thanks very much, Ning. I'm really happy to be here. And this piece and this performance are just very captivating and something really unusual and special. And I especially think this whole series is a really great opportunity to dive into the performer's experience of a piece that I think often gets lost. I think often it tends to be centered on the composer making a work or how a listener experiences it. And there's a really rich experience of performance that I'm really interested to hear what you all have to say about this piece in particular. So we'll just dive into the questions. I asked each of you last week or so to make some notes about your most vivid memories or impressions of the piece before you went back and reviewed it. And I'm hoping you'll be willing to share some of those now. The performance was almost 3 years ago. So what I'm asking for is really a subjective, very mediated response. And then the second part of the question is whether those memories were either shifted or somehow corrected or enriched when you watched the video or looked over the score, and anything you want to say about that.
Sure, I think I will start. And for those of you who are watching on YouTube Live, you probably see Mr. Tiger there. So I guess, I remember this very vividly, and it's still on my phone, that I took a pretty long video of the tiger puppet during our dress rehearsal right before the concert. And I've shown that video to many people. And I think one of the, just a really surprising moment, both as a performer and also as an audience member, because I'm also watching the tiger puppet, is how the tiger becomes such a big part of the piece, and also the rhythm that it's in its walking, striding forward, has made such a big impression on me. And I have to say, like, now looking at him looking, just going back, and because we're doing this episode to look at the tiger, I have to say that rhythm actually, just really just comes right back to my memory. That rhythm sets up the part of the piece for me, and how it's still pretty shocking to look at him, even though he's so cute.
I feel like my first impressions of the piece when we started, I didn't really know what to make of the sounds. You know, it was like, I mean, on the one hand, when you're a performer, you're listening to your own sounds, right? So I was listening kind of like to what I was doing. But then if I pulled back and kind of listened to the overall texture, I was like, man, I don't know. Like, there was a lot of unknowns. It's like, what is the direction? What is the arc? What is the thing? I knew it was a lot of amazing sounds together. But to be honest, it started kind of creepy. Like, I have this, flower pot that I do these squeaks with. And I started getting really into it. I've used it since, Michelle, so that's a great sound. Thank you for introducing me to that sound. Like that and Waldteufel are like my main jams now. But so like I'll do that thing and it's like very squeaky, and it's, even though it's just a flower pot ceramic, it's like very foreboding, like foreboding. It's very unknown, and you can't really control it. And I just remember feeling a little, I guess, out of control, but in control. And it was like a sound world that I had not inhabited before. So it's like this red room actually that we see back there, to be honest. It's very disorienting, and but in a really beautiful way, I thought.
Yeah, I have very like two really distinct like memories and reactions, like Russell and like Ning, or especially like Ning. I have a very concrete memory of some of like my materials that I was using. Like, we have these little Bluetooth powered speakers and a special app that we downloaded to our phone. I also had a battery powered vibrator that I used in the piano keys. And so I remember those like materials. And when I listened to the piece, I wasn't really able to separate those sounds in some ways all the time. They were very blended. And that's kind of my second memory, is that, and we've talked about this a lot in all these episodes, the experience of performing something for the first time for a premiere, or even just performing in general, is so different than listening. You're sort of thinking about music in a really different way, and you're listening in a really different way. And my memory of this piece was somehow that it was sparse. And that's not at all my experience when I re-watched the video, or when I listened to the recording again, is that no, it's like, it's so saturated and so rich, actually. So it's very interesting. That's what my brain remembered from 3 years ago.
Laura, you reminded me of something. Our experience as performers, like you said, is so different once we're listening to it. When we're playing it, it's like one thing, but then when we revisit it, when we look at the documentation, that then like informs future performances, And if we had not commissioned this piece, for instance, and we were, I don't know, an ensemble somewhere else and saw the documentation first, that would be a completely different way of playing a piece. It's more like how you do it with, I don't know, scores from a library or something like that. You reference old recordings, you reference all this stuff, and it's a totally different experience as people who are creating it with a composer, because there's a lot of unknowns until it's documented,
It's so interesting that all of you are getting to sort of elements of the verticality of the piece, and how the layers build something, and how you're each doing things, but they come together in this really mysterious way that that's even different from being there and hearing it live. To go back, it's just another thing, which totally makes sense to me, because I can't grasp it even as one document of the thing. It's very slippery that way. And another aspect of that layering is, just Russell, what you started to talk about, the materials of the piece and what you all were talking about. They tend to have very particular associations. I'm thinking of the puppet and the sort of childhood associations of a fuzzy puppet. as well as some of the effects used. And there are a number of effects used on the loops, drawn from things like Popeye, the cartoon, and sci-fi types of effects. And to me, I hear a sort of tension between the seriousness and the breadth of the piece. It's about half an hour long. Um, and these kitsch or sort of nostalgic elements. So Michelle, could you talk about how you think about that choice of materials and that type of tension?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I try to put myself back several years when I was, conceiving of this piece, I was definitely in this space where I was very exhausted from my own work, I guess, sort of the things that I was doing, and I wanted to break it somehow. And I often think about nostalgia and whether or not it has a place in contemporary music. I don't know if I've sort of just kind of interpreted things wrong, but throughout my sort of new music education, there's always this kind of a demand to look forward, to break things, to progress, or to look upon the past with suspicion. And so nostalgia didn't have a place, in that, like, because nostalgia is about sort of, it's a massaging of memories, right? Nostalgia is it kind of lies to you, because it's like you're looking back upon things with rose-colored lenses, and how can that have a place in more modernist music? So I wanted to allow, these kinds of like elements of childhood play back into my work, by referencing things of like cartoons and sci-fi and this toy puppet, which is really absurd. And I'm really happy that Yarnwire were up to it, because I was afraid that this puppet would sort of be, I don't know. I felt like it was kind of a big risk. I definitely wanted to create this tension. So there's all these kind of, these tiny little sounds. Everything's kind of precious in a way. You have little kind of references to broken music boxes, and there's a music box in the piece that doesn't really come through in the recording. And just kind of trying to put these two together, these two worlds together, these like this clinking of like porcelain teacups, and just how would that fit together in a kind of more abstracted space that can feel like, disorienting. I guess this piece is a bit disorienting for the performers and for the listener, but there are like these sort of anchor points that are, supposed to be evocative. So definitely I saw it as a sort of, what was the word that you used before? It was like a kind of, not a rebellion, but a resistance, a transgression. Maybe that was the word.
Yeah, I feel like that came up at some point. Yeah. And it's interesting that those things sort of sit in the memories of each of the performers too. Those elements kind of anchor part of your experience of the piece from what you've shared already. Mm-hmm. There's a comment in the performance notes. Michelle, you said things don't sound like themselves, and that I think some of that is the layering, but also I don't know. Well, I don't want to theorize about it too much, because I'm interested in what all of you have to say. I'm wondering if that tension sort of between sort of kitsch and nostalgia and the performance tasks and the seriousness in some way of the piece, if that carried into the performance experience. Could get your responses now, or we could play this clip and then comment on that. I don't know if any of you want to comment on it before we get into
what is this clip?
It's the reveal.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that was dramatic. It was dramatic. I mean, I made that reveal. It comes almost at the end of the piece. So with some context, the puppet is behind a velvet curtain, and you hear this repeated sound of his feet clacking on the wooden platform, but you don't know what's making it until this moment. And it's
the whole
overly
piece,
dramatic
right?
in this theatrical way.
The whole piece, he's walking. Is that right?
Yeah, he's whole walking. Yeah,
So it's
from
like
the
it's
very
this
beginning.
ostinato.
I mean,
yeah.
And,
So
and
go ahead, Michelle.
no, I was saying, like, and it was interesting. Of course, once he was revealed, a lot of people in the audience whipped out their iPhones.
Did they?
Of course, we didn't see that.
No.
I believe it.
Yeah.
Should
What did
we
people
keep-
do? Did they laugh? Did they were they
Yeah,
scared?
they laughed. They got their phones out. They started videoing and taking pictures.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome. Yeah. Let's check out
Should we
the
take a
clip.
Let's
look at
watch
that
it.
clip?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I forgot there was a light on it.
So
I
there's,
love it.
I mean, it's very theatrical. And Russell and Ian, when you walk over towards it, you're very serious.
Yeah.
And what it's revealing, that feels like part of that tension. But are there, I mean, if any of you want to comment on that or any other just parts of the piece or the overall performativity of it, if that tension was something that you felt
Well, I
between
think
those types of elements.
Yeah, I think whenever we're approaching a piece just in general, we're always thinking about how do we perform it for an audience, as opposed to their experience listening to it on a recording. So whatever the piece is, we're always thinking about, I mean, not necessarily some theater or drama, but, how we're going to inhabit the piece physically. And so I think a lot of the elements in Michelle's piece, I mentioned the flower pot, and Ian has the little saucers and stuff like that. All those are very tactile and very physical things. So we're able to kind of perform them in a like a concerted way, right? For the tiger, I think it was really important to us. I guess it failed, but it was important to us that maybe people didn't laugh. Like we didn't want to be like real kitschy, because this tiger has a lot of weight to it. It could go so many different ways. So we were like, okay, we're going to treat it seriously. We're not going to laugh ourselves when we reveal it, even though it's hilarious, but scary. And so we're going to approach it like this mystery, like we don't know what it is either, and pull it back. The other thing is, though, there were a lot of cables on the ground, so we had to look really serious and watch out where we're going to go.
But I think that laughter, though, from the audience's
Yeah.
perspective, I mean, I don't know if it would, I think it was just of a surprise or,
Yeah.
kind of like a joy that,
Right.
Yeah.
But we didn't want to make
that
it.
was unsuspected.
Yeah, it's awesome. Like we didn't want to make it campy. We wanted to give it its full value, And so I think that's what we did there. And then later in the piece, there's stuff with those Bluetooth speakers that Laura was talking about. And that was really tricky. We had to, because when you hear electronic sounds, no one knows where they're coming from. And so we did make a kind of concerted effort as ensemble members to perform those so that people could see that we were doing some action that was producing sound. That's kind of the opposite of the old kind of like electronic musician who sits behind their laptop and presses play through iTunes for their set. We want to make sure that you can see the action. So
Yeah,
I
I
think
keep
if
thinking
you-
about that too, like how laughter, it's not just that something is comical, like people also laugh when they're uncomfortable with something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I was
Yeah,
just thinking about what
a
Russell
lot of
said.
feedback I've gotten from this piece is that the tiger makes them feel uncomfortable. Yeah.
He's making
I
me
think it would have been
uncomfortable
very
right now.
different if you hadn't played it deadpan too. I mean, if you'd been cracking
Yeah.
up when you went over to open the curtain,
Yeah.
that would have broken any tension and probably made it
Yeah.
a lot less funny too, or whatever brought about that reaction.
But in rehearsals, I mean, the tiger is really funny, cracking lots of jokes, so it's totally different.
Yeah, I just a little more about the tiger. I mean, we're not going to stay on player 5 forever, but I wanted to know, just, is there anything more you wanted to say about how you related to him as, rhythmically, or, what kind of influence his presence had, and just generally how you felt about having a fifth player? Because he's known as player number 5 in the
That's
score.
true.
Right?
Yeah.
I think obviously we didn't know who exactly, because Tiger didn't, I guess, if my memory was right, the tiger was not present at every single one of our rehearsals. So he was absent for
The first couple without Tiger.
for first couple without Tiger, exactly. And like I mentioned before, that rhythm of his walking, it's and especially during the entire piece, it's like a very dominant force to me, because I still remember that rhythm, that sound very vividly, from performing the piece. And I think that is a sound that is sort of really built in, just like a lining of the piece for its entirety. And I don't know what people were thinking that it was standing there, since I wonder what people thought, what was behind that before Ian and Russell revealed it. I wonder if people even noticed or thought at all or guessed what it was. So I think that moment, it's so theatrical. It's like, I think because of the lighting inside the box, it made it creepy. But still, look at it. It's so cute.
It's also really small too, so it's like this thing that's been creating this really large sound is this tiny little guy.
He's amplified. Is there something else? Is there something that's built into the amplification? It seems like the sound is different.
There's just a contact mic
Okay.
on the bottom.
It does change your approach, I think, in the piece. Once you know the tiger's going to be there, as performers, we know that's coming, right? And that and so I think when we practiced the piece before we had the tiger, it was really just about sound production and just your usual kind of new music. We're going to execute this kind of thing. I mean, this is not your usual new music piece. That's not what I'm saying. But, we had a way of rehearsing, right? But then when the tiger joined our rehearsals, it really changed, I think, the way that we played the beginning, because we knew it had to lead to this other thing. There was something underneath all of our sound. It's like when in some pieces, they have a field recording that you play along with, or any kind of tape part. Without that additional element, the sounds you're making don't make any sense. And so once this tiger came in, everything kind of made sense.
It's really interesting to hear. Let's take a look at a moment after the curtain was lifted. Cue that.
Yep.
And
Whoa.
I want to just compare that. I want to just compare that to just any other moment chosen at random from the middle of the piece.
Mm-hmm.
So now I want to ask the tiger, do you have anything to say about what it was like to participate in this ensemble? Thanks. That's really helpful. What that clarifies for me is that it seems like you're really operating on your own time scale, and you're not affected by the performative decisions happening around you. And I think that's really totally fair. So moving on, just talking to the rest of the group, and to Michelle, the more I listen to the piece, the more I hear the play with time as being bound up with the timbral distortion of the feedback and the sound effects. I want to look at a couple of clips and get your comments about the type of presence or physical connection you feel as performers when the sounds are displaced, either in time or in timbre or both. So does any of you want to jump in? I could also explain too, I realize, this is clear to all of you, but maybe not to people listening in, that a lot of elements were pre-recorded or recorded during the performance, right? And then looped subsequently, often much later in the piece.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I do remember just learning how to be a sort of a DJ of my own sound. And that was kind of stressful to do it correctly. I did have a lot of fun playing with the apps on the phone, like you can see on the screen. But there was a lot of pressure in doing it very correctly, accurately, because one would lead to the next. If you didn't do the previous one correctly, the next one would be just, kind of messed up. But it was so fun, and I remember playing with the app after the performance as well, just because now I know this app exists on my phone. But at the time, I remember concentrating a lot about the execution of my own app, making that sound correctly. I guess I didn't even know that Russell and Ian were so theatrically manipulating the speakers.
It reminded me of like using guitar pedals and that kind of, like, this is the kind of electronics actually I really like, even though it is challenging. I totally agree with Ning. There were like problems with the program, obviously, and like things happen, and so you're always working against the technology, but not in a same way as you might work against like a Max Patch, Max MSP, or something like that. It's more tactile, kind of like, we've had effects pedals for so long for rock bands and things like that, and this to me was a kind of like updated cell phone version of that. You have presets, you have your distortions, you have feedback and all that. So it's a very familiar world in a way that like I felt some control over, and that I could feel it was reacting to how I was playing, and I really enjoy that. And then I think the reason why that Ian and I probably were more physical with it is because it also brought to mind, I don't know, like noise shows and going to the sonic world is related too. And if you've ever been to, those kinds of performances, people are not just sitting there like doing nothing. They're reacting physically to the sound, whether or not it has an effect on it. It's more about the performance. And so it was actually kind of liberating, I felt like, because the app generated so much from just a little tiny phone, that it kind of gave me, I felt the freedom to kind of get into it in that way. Though, a proscenium stage in a church is a little bit different than a basement noise show.
But somehow strangely appropriate for the piece. Another bit of tension and contrast.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that church, that big spaceship thing behind you guys, just towering over you.
No.
Yeah, that was cool.
Michelle also wrote in the performance notes about the room for expression. This is quoting from the notes. The room for expression and the way the sounds are activated and the way the notes are played. Did you feel a qualitative difference in the expressive possibilities between playing your instruments and activating those sounds? And we can look at a clip from earlier in the piece now where they're being more directly activated, and then a later clip with more active layers of sound. So maybe we'll look at those and then get your input on that. So how did you each experience that? Or was someone ready to start?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's in some ways hard for me to remember how I was experiencing it at that time. But when I watch the video and when I kind of look at the score and see what I was doing at various points of the piece, at this point, it seems like there is somehow much more expressive freedom in the things that are less traditional playing. Whether or not that's activating a sound in. It's almost like the traditional playing techniques are more activating sounds, and the things that are a little more unusual, like the speakers and the Bluetooth and the feedback, and those things have maybe more room for expression in some ways, or flexibility or interpretation, and that the things that we might normally think of as expressive actually are a little bit more constrictive, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I have to say, just my experience of listening to this piece compared to my experience playing of the piece is it feels different in a way that I really cannot distinguish anymore of what is that I am playing and what is that I am hearing from another source. So that those layers of sound, especially towards the end of the piece, are so interconnected, and everybody's sound is so interconnected. I felt there was a lot of room for like Laura said, freedom. And I remember distinctly feeling that more and more towards the end of the piece. There was like just a lot of freedom to play around and to sort of experience what I was doing.
Is that something that that's something in the score, right, Michelle, that you were hoping for?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Do you do that often in things?
Yeah. I mean, I want everyone that is involved in my music to bring themselves to the table. Otherwise, it's just, it's not interesting. It's not interesting as a composer. It's not interesting as a performer or in collaborations at all, to just notate everything in such a way where you want it to be reproducible almost, accurately every single time. And yeah, and I like that there are these unknowns, a lot of these variables, so that things can change. I think there's a lot of space.
It's really interesting to hear that it sort of inverts from what I heard from the musicians, that it inverted the more activating parts that gave that extra room. It sounds like it fulfills what you were the world you were trying to open up, Michelle.
Sort of like a world that's sort of critiquing itself, perhaps.
Yeah.
It's interesting too. I mean, I'm thinking about this piece, and so much is electronic, and it's mediated, through speakers, and they're not the usual, like, they're not clean sounds. They're very dirty, but they're like sounds that are familiar through, I don't know, pop music recording, the way that we listen to music now on headphones,
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if, we're able to express ourselves through that stuff because it's what we're consuming more. I don't know. This is a little far-fetched, but
yeah. I mean, maybe it's sort of the music that I know that I do have friends who did not grow up listening to pop or rock music,
mm-hmm.
and that's possibly why there's sort of an ease, because like playing with feedback, we know what that is.
Yeah, you go into Guitar Center and you hear that. There's no shredding in this piece, though. So,
so I think we actually have a question from the audience. Here it comes. Ian asks, and not Ian Antonio, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, but another Ian asks, looking back now, I wonder if it's possible to come up with a way of performing it without laughter, i.e., could you properly scare them enough that they didn't laugh? That's a great question.
Yeah, but again, laughter can come from being scared, right?
It's true. Yeah.
I wonder. Is there a way to perform? Yeah, I mean, I think that's
Make
what
the
we,
tiger bigger.
I mean, if you
True.
were in a, or
Her
if you were
blood
in a
comes
space,
gushing out.
have an actual tiger.
I was actually trying to answer that question.
Okay.
Seriously, you guys.
Sorry.
No, I mean, it could see that, like, maybe lighting it in a certain way would make it less of a, oh, kind of moment and more like a, oh, kind of, you know, if you were in a space where you could black out the entire, like a black box theater where you could do a complete blackout and then like suddenly you see just like this thing emerge slowly that's, you know, lit from underneath. It's super,
Yeah.
super creepy.
What if he wasn't on stage? What if he was like closer to the audience or something? Maybe that
Like-
wouldn't change anything.
Like a Deus Ex Machina sort of moment where it like comes down from the ceiling.
That will definitely
be
have
really
laughters.
All right.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I like the way we ended up framing it, you know, how you had it on the stage and stuff. But yeah, it is a question. Like, how do you deal with this thing?
I think we have actually another question
Wow, that's
from the
great.
audience. So we'll take that. It's not Ian, sorry, but the question is fascinating piece and performance. And this question is for you, Jennie, whose experimental music, your book, Experimental Music Since 1970, was really enjoyed by the audience member. Among the discussions you pursued in that book, where do you think this piece fits?
That's interesting. And I had before this directly tried to place it, but I think I would probably put it in, I should know this, chapter 6, the histories, and how something sort of rubs against a sense of history, and even if that's a very personal history. And I think all of us are in a similar generational zone where our reference points, you know, our childhood associates somewhat with these things. So that kind of rub, I think, is one area where it would connect in a meaningful way, but also temporality, and how it plays with time and how it warps a sense of time. So I would have that dilemma. This performance was a year after my book, so I'd probably be somewhere else as well, but I think those would be my first two impulses, because time definitely travels in its own strange way here, and the multiple temporalities, the sort of past coming into the present with the recorded material coming back, and the tiger being sort of oblivious to everything around and going on his sort of intergalactic march, and yeah, these multiple things all going on. It's I might end up talking about it there rather than histories as I talk it through out loud now. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks for the questions, everyone.
Yeah.
That question was from Joseph. So Joseph, thanks for your question.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you all. I think, do we have a little bit more time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know, Jennie, do you have another question for all of us? I think we still have a little time left.
Maybe I'll take I have a sort of cluster of questions here, but maybe I'll just take part of it. You know, I feel like we're all feeling pretty intensely what it is to be inhabiting late 2020. Part of this, I think, for musicians and artists in general is sort of what gets lost between a live performance and audio or video documentation, even if it's live, but you know, when there's not that sense of presence. Just taking it directly to this piece, sort of how does the documentation connect or fail to connect or draw new connections with this played? You could pick up on any strand of that, and either what's lost or what's gained.
Actually,
Yeah,
I want to ask Michelle, can I ask you?
Yeah.
Because since when
Yeah.
we're playing, we're pretty removed from our audience. You know, we're sort of like put onto this platform that's a little bit further and higher. But when you're experiencing this for the first time in a with the audience, how do you feel?
Well, yeah, anytime I'm hearing my music for the first time with other people, there's this very, very strong both public aspect to it and a private aspect. And I find myself hearing through everyone else's ears, you know, projecting all of my sort of insecurities through everyone else's ears. And so I'm always just completely tense, and I can't, you know, I'm holding my breath and I'm just wanting it to be over. but this one, I was a little bit more relaxed. The audience wasn't as large as it could have been, because I guess there's another concert across town at Columbia or something.
People missed out.
So yeah, no, but I was very pleased. Like this, you know, it's like, you know, you go through the rehearsals, it's really still unclear how it's going to go. But it was a great experience. You know, when we go to concerts and when we prepare music for an audience, it's this tradition. It's like this ritual, this intention of being held hostage in this moment of the duration of this, you know, this piece, right? And when if you're just kind of looking at the documentation, you can just like check your email at the same time, or you know, you're not kind of in that intentional space anymore where everyone is.
Yeah. And I think there's also this, I was thinking about like the agency you have of like visually speaking when you're actually a huge part of how we hear in a live performance like this. And in documentation, that decision is taken away from you. You see what, you know, either you don't get that choice in how you physically experience the piece. And I think also just that's something I really miss, like being in a room and feeling, especially when things get loud, you know, that like rumble in your tummy from low frequencies, you know. And I think there's just, no matter how good your speakers are at home, it's not the same.
I thought about that the other day, and it's like, we have to have it now, you know, Pixar, it didn't happen. And, you know, there it is. And we're lucky that we have really nice documentation and got a pretty good version of it, you know, so I'm really grateful for that. But yeah, it's the energy is different, and it like literally the sonic energy is different, right? Through airwaves.
Yeah, like how the sound travels through the room and how the room, you know, shapes the sound, like everything is working together.
Yeah, I just listening to this and spending time with the video, I could tell that the air was really thick with all of these sounds, but my air wasn't thick with the sounds. I could infer that from the documentation.
Yeah.
So it's sort of, it's a step removed from the immediate experience, but it's something anyway. And I'm grateful that this much is here for now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Man, I can't wait to play this piece again.
It's true.
Yeah. Are you gonna do that?
I hope so.
I don't know. Tiger's got a really busy schedule. It's been the biggest impediment to doing this. You know, it's just like he's always on tour.
Look at him going somewhere.
Can't get a sub.
Maybe a bigger one next time.
Yeah, actually, I have a plan to expand it to 3 puppets.
Whoa.
There's a fuzzy flamingo and a panda bear that I have in my collection.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you so much. That was really great fun chatting with both of you. So our next episode is on Thursday, November 12th, and we're having a talk with composer Sarah Hennies and also David Grubbs. And please, for those who are watching, please subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any episodes. And you can always support this series, feedback on patreon.com and become a patron. Yes, that's all for today. Thank you so much, Jennie. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. This was great.
Thanks, Mr. Tiger.
Thanks. Yeah.
Yes.